Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Segment and portion of the Paul Harrell program, just so you know, is brought to you by the great folks at Conduit for Commerce, because they're putting Arkansas small business first. And joining us now to talk a little bit more about that, we have Brenda Vassaur-Taylor with us from Conduit for Commerce. Brenda, welcome back.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for mentioning our article from this week that came out, Conduit for Commerce, Tax Reform and Relief Task Force Recommendations.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting. When we went over this on the program a couple of days ago, there obviously is a task task force. Sorry, I've had so many different nicknames for it at this point that I'm messing up myself. But and Conduit for Commerce has put out recommendations, and very serious, specific recommendations for tax reform and relief. And we did go over it. And Brenda, I got to say, one of the things that stood out to me is something that I haven't heard anybody else say, and that's that our tax system is really the issue that drives government spending. You write here in the paper, the level of government spending in Arkansas is directly determined by the tax system, not the budget process. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, that's exactly right, Paul. But first, I want to, again, thank you for having us on. Conduit for Commerce is focused on small business in Arkansas. But let me tell you why we feel like, we qualify as a voice here.
Okay.
I am, let me give you a little bit of background about what I do. I have an accounting degree. I have a law degree. I have a master's in tax law, and I have practiced tax law for over 30 years. And these are the kinds of things I deal with daily. And so I can recall as a young law student and then getting out, practicing law with fresh eyes, I looked at the laws that other states had, and I thought, well, why can't Arkansas do something like that? Back then, Delaware and their corporate system, everyone wanted to set up a corporation in Delaware. And as I learned, well, it's just a matter of changing the laws. So couldn't Arkansas do that? And so I applaud the opportunity that we now have and that the legislators now have to change Arkansas's tax code so that we, too, can become a dynamic state and engage through changing our laws to free commerce in Arkansas rather than restrain it or control it. And so as we look at ways to do that, and as I, tried to go look a little closer and a little deeper, we've heard our governor say we have a revenue problem. And as I look at it, I think, well, I guess he's right, because the revenue, the money that we have to spend in Arkansas, is directly tied to our tax structure, our taxing system. Everything that comes in the door through taxes or regulation fees, whatever, is everything that's spent. But everything that does come in is spent. And so we spend all that we rake in, and there's not any mechanism that we have to reduce that. And so what you hear now, well, we have a revenue problem, implying we need more revenue. And then you have people say, no, we have a spending problem. Well, we're spending everything we bring in under the current system in Arkansas, that Revenue Stabilization Act that we love so much because it, quote, requires us to spend no more every year than we take in. Therefore, we call it our balanced budget. But at the same time, our system itself is what's driving more and more spending. As more comes in, we spend more. And it's like not having a limit on your gas pedal,
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking with Brenda Vassaur-Taylor from Conduit for Commerce. You're exactly right, Brenda. And in this, again, the quote from that I just read, the level of government spending in Arkansas is directly determined by the tax system, not the budget process. So that would suggest that if they reduce our taxes, meaning the government gets less money, that would be a positive thing. But let me ask you this, Brenda. Will you define what a tax cut is, in your opinion?
A tax cut, and I believe anyone who is listening, just just the common voter, when they think of tax cut, they think they're going to send less money. They personally will send less money, but they don't think just about themselves getting a tax cut. They assume the entire system is reduced, meaning that Arkansas would basically receive less money than it did the prior year. This tax neutral and shifting taxes, the rules under which this task force is assigned, they are promising to modernize and simplify the code, be competitive and attract businesses, create jobs, be fair to individuals and entities. And so that fairness thing, when you start moving it around and saying, we're going to get rid of exemptions, that sounds really good. These people who are getting to be exempt under paying taxes, well, that goes to the fairness piece. But when you're getting rid of exemptions, you're raising taxes, the revenue that comes into the state, and people are paying more. But if you're going to reform it so that we have actually attracted business, we have to start out, before we eliminate an exemption, we have to significantly cut rates. And that's the thing I have not heard this task force say. I've heard them say we're going to broaden the tax base, meaning more people will pay taxes. We're going to, in other words, increase the number of people who pay. We're going to get rid of the deductions that some people have. But I have yet to hear them say they're going to cut the rates. I've heard them say, if we can get the internet sales tax and it brings in enough money, as soon as we know how much it brings in, then maybe we can talk about cutting rates. That's not what Arkansas needs, because that will produce more revenue for the state of Arkansas, and that is a tax increase.
And
so you measure tax cuts by how much revenue the state gets.
Exactly, and because of the Revenue Stabilization Act, we're at a point to where if the government gets more money, it will get spent. I mean, you hear at Conduit for Commerce the tax recommendations. You guys are really articulating what the actual problem is, and when you mention that you haven't heard them talk about significantly cutting the rates, I do believe. I mean, we've documented why here on the program. It's because, Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum, when he, kicked off the very first meeting, he, corrected a perception, or at least his perception in the media, that this task force was there just to recommend future tax cuts to the General Assembly. And he said that that's not necessarily the case. And so, we have heard these buzzwords like broadening the base, eliminate exemptions. It seems to me and this is what I'm worried about, that we're going to have a tax increase, meaning more money coming from the people to the government, and then they're going to say, and we'll lower your taxes later, or we'll pass a bill next time that'll lower your taxes this amount, 2 years from now, and then more the next year. It'll be like a phase-in process. And if they do that, they're ignoring the problem that you guys are articulating here, which is the money that comes in, they immediately spend.
That's right. If you want smaller government, if you want to cut spending, we have to cut the taxes defined by the government gets less money than it did the year before. And let me tell you something else that I want our listeners to be listening for is, don't fall for the progressives' tendency to use the class warfare card. We hear about the race card, but class warfare card. No one wants to talk about corporate tax cuts. You've heard Donald Trump talk about them, and I applaud him, because I know one of the bullet points on the assignment of the task force is to create jobs. Government does not create jobs. Government can free enterprise to create jobs. It can restrict enterprise from creating jobs. But if we're going to look at what we've already assigned government to do, we've assigned them to educate. Public schools should be educating the future workforce. They can educate the workforce. They can provide workers, educated workers. They're not doing that. Do that job first. Do that job, period. Leave companies alone. And I would say that if I could educate the audience on one thing, I would want to teach them that corporations do not pay taxes. Large companies do not pay taxes. Now, the small mom and pop that happen to have a corporation, C corporation, they're going to pay tax, and they're going to feel it, but they're going to adjust we're going to go out of business because we're not making a profit. But big companies that stay in business pass on those taxes. And I would ask your listeners to just look at your current mail and see that the Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield raised the premiums 19.3% with the permission of our Arkansas Insurance Commissioner. And that 19.3% includes the 2.5% tax that's going to go to the state of Arkansas. So the state of Arkansas got a 19.3% raise in premiums that they're going to get from Blue Cross Blue Shield. But Blue Cross Blue Shield's not paying those taxes. They're passing it on to those who are paying it. Now, then I have to do a little plug for what's really happening with our Medicaid expansion. The federal government is paying those premiums. Well, the federal government doesn't get that money out of thin air. They take that out of our left pocket. If we want to say Arkansas taxes come out of our right pocket. So the taxpayer is paying these taxes. Corporations do not pay taxes. So do not be afraid for Arkansas, because I have put a bold recommendation. If Arkansas really wanted to become a dynamic, business-friendly environment, they would eliminate corporate income tax. And if you look at the system currently, Arkansas is not receiving a lot of money, a lot of its general revenue from corporations. If you offset what they receive by what they're giving away, the companies they want to give it to, picking from those who are strong enough to pay taxes.
Talking about corporate welfare.
Winners and losers.
You're talking about corporate welfare, yeah.
You get rid of all of that, yeah, and then it would probably be close to a revenue-neutral tax elimination. And talk about fair, we could really wave the flag, because that's fairness to entities and to the individual.
And such an immediate effect. And it is a bold policy suggestion, recommendation, eliminate Arkansas's corporate tax altogether. So if you put a freeze on the current status quo, the current version of what they consider economic development, which you've already alluded to, taking taxpayer dollars, giving it to private corporations, to build a factory or revitalize a factory, and in the next 2 or 3 years they're going to create 30 jobs here or 100 jobs there. Can you imagine if they just in a blanket policy shift said no more corporate tax in Arkansas? Now every existing Arkansas corporation, every one of them, now has all of this extra, income, and you have the ability to see an economic impact immediately, not 2-3 years. Let's cross our hearts and hopefully the government will have gambled correctly and we'll actually see some sort of improvement in our economy from their investment.
Well, let listeners just think about this for a while. Rather than falling for the class warfare card and thinking those big companies need to pay. I mean, think about the fact that I told you that I'm a tax attorney. I get paid by people to help them pay less tax, pay everything that they owe to the government, but to pay no more. Now, don't you think I would be interested in a company asking me how to pay less tax? That I might say, first, you need to move to a state that doesn't charge taxes to a corporation. And as mobile as these companies are, why would they move to Arkansas? We've heard Representative Charlene Fight argue that we need to make Arkansas friendly to those 1,300 military retirees who can move here and live here and pay no taxes. 1,300 people are going to help our economy. If Arkansas legislators seriously want to make Arkansas stand out and be a commerce magnet, something that they're really not benefiting from currently, they would get rid of the corporate income tax, and they would see corporate America flock to Arkansas like it's never done before.
Yeah, you are exactly right. I mean, this paper is really, really good. And here's another quote from it. Therefore, if you want spending reduced in Arkansas, if you want smaller government, you simply cut taxes. And then in the middle of the paper and the end of the paper, and I'll give you the last word, Brenda Vassaur Taylor from Conduit for Commerce, you say that it is merely a question of this, quote, how much do the people of Arkansas want to pay for government? Because you clearly establish here, Brenda, that they spend every dime we're giving them is going right back out on some priority.
Well, that's right. To say that we want smaller government, cut spending, we're going to cut spending, we're going to do a budget plan, that's ridiculous. All we need to talk about is how much are we going to cut taxes, because under Arkansas system now, everything that comes in is spent.
That's exactly right.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Brenda Vassaur Taylor, Conduit for Commerce. Check it out, folks. Conduitforcommerce.org. You can check out the recommendations to the task force. I certainly hope. I know they're meeting next week, and I hope they take these recommendations seriously. Brenda, it's always great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Paul.
All righty. Folks, we're going to take a break. The phone number, call us, text is 870-275-9799. Coming